The Academy of Galactic Warfare stood like a crystal monument against the violet sky of Kepler 442b, its transparent walls reflecting the light of twin suns. Inside the main lecture hall, 200 of the galaxy's finest military minds sat in perfect rows, their various alien forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that would have amazed any human tourist. But today, there was a human among them. Marcus Chin sat in the back row, his simple Earth uniform looking dull compared to the elaborate ceremonial armor worn by his classmates. The Zephyrian beside him had scales that shifted color with emotion, currently showing nervous blue patterns. Across the aisle, a Korthak warrior's forearms twitched with anticipation, while behind them, a gas-form nebuloid floated in its containment suit. They were all here for the same reason: to prove they deserved to lead military forces in the Galactic Alliance. The Academy only accepted the best of the best from each species, and graduation meant commanding fleets that protected billions of lives. "Attention, cadets," announced Instructor Vexhai, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had survived 3 interstellar wars. The tall, silver-skinned Altarian moved with predatory grace, her 4 red eyes scanning the room. Behind her, a massive holographic display showed the Academy's symbol, a sword crossed with an olive branch. "Today marks your final tactical examination," she continued, her voice echoing through the silent hall. "You have spent 2 years learning strategy, weapons systems, alien psychology, and combat theory. Now we test whether you can think like a true military leader." Marcus shifted in his seat. For 2 years, he had struggled to keep up with classmates who had natural advantages he could barely imagine. The Korthaks were born warriors with reflexes 3 times faster than humans. The Zephyrians could process information at computer-like speeds. The Altarians had perfect memory and could think in 4 dimensions simultaneously. Humans had been part of the Galactic Alliance for only 50 years, and they were still seen as newcomers. Most species considered them adequate foot soldiers, but questioned whether they had the mental capacity for strategic command. Marcus had heard the whispers. Humans think too simply. They lack the intellectual depth for complex warfare. They should stick to what they know. What frustrated Marcus most was that he couldn't entirely disagree. Compared to his classmates, human technology was primitive, human society was chaotic, and human military history was embarrassingly brief in galactic terms. He had made it this far through pure determination, but he knew today would push him beyond his limits. "The test is simple in concept," Instructor Vexhai announced, touching a control pad. The holographic display changed to show a 3-dimensional tactical scenario. "You will be given a military problem that requires creative thinking. Your task is to identify 3 different methods to achieve the objective. You have 30 minutes. A murmur ran through the hall. 3 methods in 30 minutes was challenging even for the most gifted species. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he watched his classmates straighten with confidence. The nebuloid began glowing brighter, a sign of excitement. The Korthak cracked his knuckles with sounds like breaking wood. "The scenario," Vexhai continued, "involves a hostage situation on a space station. Enemy forces have captured a research facility containing vital Alliance technology. They have taken 50 civilian researchers as hostages and threatened to kill them if any rescue is attempted. The station's shields are impenetrable, and it's located in a nebula that prevents long-range scanning or communication." The display zoomed in to show the space station in detail. It was a standard research platform, roughly spherical, with docking bays, defensive systems, and what appeared to be sophisticated shielding. Red markers indicated enemy positions while blue dots showed the hostages scattered throughout various sections. The enemy force consists of Raider Coalition Marines, highly trained and well-equipped. Intelligence suggests they have between 50 and 100 soldiers aboard. They possess military-grade weapons, armor, and have already demonstrated their willingness to execute hostages. Standard diplomatic protocols have failed. Marcus studied the display, his mind already working through possibilities. The scenario was deliberately complex, designed to test not just tactical knowledge, but creative problem-solving under pressure. Around him, he could see other cadets beginning to formulate their approaches. Additionally, Vexhai added with what might have been a smile, The research being conducted on that station is classified at the highest levels. The technology cannot be allowed to fall into enemy hands under any circumstances. If necessary, the entire station must be destroyed rather than captured. The implications hit the room like a physical force. Not only did they need to rescue the hostages, but they also had to secure or destroy the research. The two objectives could easily conflict with each other. "You may begin," Vexhai announced. Around the hall, cadets immediately activated their personal data pads, some speaking into voice recorders while others began sketching diagrams. Marcus sat still for a moment, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem. The Zephyrian beside him was already working, his scales shifting to the deep purple that indicated intense concentration. His data pad showed complex mathematical calculations involving trajectory analysis and shield harmonics. It was exactly the kind of sophisticated technical approach that typically dominated academy thinking. Marcus forced himself to focus. 3 methods to resolve the situation. He started with the obvious approaches that his classmates were probably considering. Method 1, direct assault. Find a way to penetrate the shields and overwhelm the enemy force through superior firepower. The challenge was doing this without getting the hostages killed. Perhaps a coordinated attack from multiple angles, or finding a weakness in the shield grid. He began sketching rough diagrams of attack vectors, considering how to disable defensive systems while minimizing risk to civilians. It was straightforward military thinking, but it felt too simple. Around him, he could hear other cadets discussing similar approaches with far more technical sophistication. Method 2, infiltration and subterfuge. Get a small team aboard the station covertly, then work from within to neutralize the enemy while protecting the hostages. The problem was how to get past the shields and sensors without detection. Marcus considered various stealth technologies, but realized he was at a disadvantage. His human understanding of advanced stealth systems was limited compared to classmates who had grown up with such technology. Still, he began outlining a plan involving disguised ships and electronic warfare. As he worked, he couldn't help but overhear fragments of conversation from other cadets. The Altarian 2 rows ahead was discussing quantum phase manipulation with mathematical precision. Behind him, a Korthak was explaining an assault strategy that involved coordinated attacks across 17 different vectors simultaneously. Their solutions were brilliant, complex, and far beyond anything Marcus could conceive with human knowledge alone. He felt a familiar sense of inadequacy creeping in. Maybe the doubters were right. Maybe humans simply weren't meant for this level of strategic thinking. Then he stopped himself. That kind of thinking had never helped him before, and it wouldn't help him now. Instead of trying to match his classmates' technical brilliance, he needed to think like a human. What would human military leaders do in this situation? The answer came to him gradually as he remembered human military history. Humans had always faced superior enemies with better technology and training. But somehow, they had survived, and often won through approaches that others found unpredictable or even bizarre. Method 3 began forming in his mind, something his classmates probably wouldn't consider because it didn't fit traditional galactic military doctrine. But as he developed the idea further, more possibilities opened up. Human history was full of unconventional solutions, tactics that worked not because they were technically superior, but because they were unexpected. The enemy would be prepared for standard galactic military responses. But would they be ready for human thinking? Marcus found himself getting excited as more ideas flowed. Method 4. Use the nebula itself as a weapon. Method 5. Turn the hostage situation into an advantage rather than a liability. Method 6. Exploit the enemy's own protocols against them. He glanced at the time display. 20 minutes remaining. Around him, most cadets seemed to be finishing their third method and reviewing their work. Marcus was just getting started. Method 7 involved creating false intelligence to manipulate enemy decision-making. Method 8 used civilian ships in unexpected ways. Method 9 exploited the psychology of military hierarchies. His data pad filled with notes as ideas continued flowing. Each method built on human military history, from ancient guerrilla tactics to modern asymmetric warfare. Some were risky, some seemed almost absurd, but all of them could work under the right circumstances. 15 minutes remaining. Instructor Vexhai announced. Marcus barely heard her. He was in what humans called the zone, that state of focused creativity where solutions seemed to appear faster than he could write them down. Method 15 involved turning the research station's own systems against the enemy. Method 20 used the hostage's expertise as a tactical advantage. Around him, other cadets were beginning to look nervous. The Zephyrian scales had shifted to worried yellow, and even the confident Korthak was reviewing his work with obvious concern. Marcus realized that while they were struggling to find 3 good methods, he now had 25 viable approaches and was still generating new ones. Method 28 involved exploiting the time delay in nebula communications. Method 29 used the enemy's expectations about galactic military doctrine against them. Method 30 emerged as he considered how human merchant marine experience could apply to the situation. Time, Instructor Vexhai called. Marcus looked up, blinking as he returned to awareness of his surroundings. His data pad was covered with diagrams, notes, and tactical plans. Around him, other cadets were sitting back with expressions of exhaustion and varying degrees of confidence. Now, Vexhai announced, we will hear your solutions. Remember, this is not just about finding 3 methods, but about demonstrating tactical creativity and strategic thinking. Who would like to present first? A Korthak in the front row raised 2 of his 4 hands. Instructor, I volunteer. Proceed, Cadet Thrackmore. The Korthak stood, his massive frame impressive even among the diverse alien crowd. My first method involves a coordinated assault using quantum tunneling torpedoes to penetrate the shields at precisely calculated weak points. Based on harmonic analysis of the shield grid, I have identified 17 optimal strike locations that would create a cascading failure while minimizing energy discharge toward the hostage areas. Marcus had to admit it was impressive. The mathematical calculations involved were beyond his ability to verify, but the approach sounded both sophisticated and practical. My second method, Thrackmore continued, utilizes stealth infiltration through maintenance conduits, combined with neural disruption fields to incapacitate enemies without alerting their command structure. The timing would need to be precise to within 0.3 seconds across all infiltration points. Again, highly technical and requiring capabilities that humans simply didn't possess. Marcus felt his confidence wavering as he listened to the detailed presentation. My third method involves psychological warfare using targeted pheromone compounds specific to Raider Coalition species psychology, combined with sonic frequencies that will induce compliance behavior. The hostages would be protected through localized atmosphere modification. The presentation was brilliant, thorough, and exactly what Marcus had expected from one of the Academy's top cadets. When Thrackmore finished, Instructor Vexhai nodded approvingly. Excellent work, Cadet Thrackmore. Your solutions demonstrate both technical knowledge and tactical sophistication. Other cadets presented similar solutions, complex, technical, and requiring advanced technology that humans were decades away from developing. Each presentation made Marcus feel smaller and more out of place. The Altarian presented methods involving 4-dimensional tactical thinking. The Nebuloid described approaches using quantum state manipulation. The Zephyrian outlined strategies based on predictive mathematical modeling that could anticipate enemy responses 17 moves in advance. All of their solutions were impressive, but Marcus noticed something interesting. Despite their technical sophistication, most of the approaches were variations on the same basic themes: direct assault, stealth infiltration, or technological superiority. They were thinking within the established framework of galactic military doctrine. Cadet Chun, Instructor Vexhai called, and Marcus felt his stomach drop. Please present your solutions. Marcus stood on shaking legs, acutely aware that every eye in the room was on him. The human who barely belonged here, about to demonstrate why his species wasn't ready for strategic command. Instructor, he began, his voice steadier than he felt. I need to clarify something about the assignment. Vexhai's 4 red eyes focused on him with intensity. Clarify what, Cadet? The test asked for 3 methods to resolve the situation. I want to make sure I understand the minimum requirement. 3 methods, yes. Why do you ask? Marcus took a deep breath. Because I found 30 methods, and I wasn't sure if I should present all of them or just the 3 most practical. The hall fell completely silent. Even the nebuloid stopped its gentle glowing. Instructor Vexhi's expression was unreadable as she stared at him. 30 methods? She finally asked, her voice carefully neutral. Yes, Instructor. Should I present just 3, or would you like to hear more? The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could feel the skepticism radiating from his classmates. The Zephyrian scales had shifted to the orange of confusion, while the Korthak was openly staring. Present 3 to start, Vexhi said slowly. We'll see how they compare to your classmates' work. Marcus activated his data pad, his hands no longer shaking. Whether this ended in triumph or humiliation, at least he would go down thinking like a human. Method 1, he began, involves turning the hostage situation into a recruitment opportunity. The lecture hall remained deadly quiet as Marcus began his explanation. He could feel the weight of 200 alien stares, most filled with skepticism. Instructor Vexhi leaned forward slightly, her 4 red eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Method 1 involves psychological operations based on human historical precedent. Marcus continued, his confidence growing as he spoke. The hostages aren't just victims, they're researchers, which means they're intelligent, educated, and likely have skills the enemy doesn't fully understand or appreciate. He activated his data pad's projection system, displaying a rough schematic of the space station. Instead of seeing 50 hostages as 50 problems, we see them as 50 potential allies behind enemy lines. We make contact through hidden communication channels, maintenance frequencies, background radiation patterns, anything the enemy isn't monitoring. The Zephyrian beside him shifted, scales flickering to confused yellow. This wasn't the kind of approach taught in galactic military doctrine. We give the researchers simple tasks, Marcus explained. Small acts of sabotage that appear to be system malfunctions. A ventilation fan that stops working in one sector, forcing the enemy to redistribute their forces. A replicator that produces food with an unpleasant but harmless additive, making the guards irritable and less focused. Lighting that flickers in specific patterns to create psychological stress. Marcus highlighted different sections of the station on his display. The key is making these problems seem like ordinary technical failures. The enemy expects the hostages to be frightened and passive, not actively working against them. Within 6 hours, we've degraded their operational efficiency without them realizing they're under attack. A low murmur ran through the hall. Several cadets exchanged glances, clearly trying to process this unconventional approach. Meanwhile, Marcus continued, the researchers gather intelligence. They're already familiar with the station's layout, systems, and security protocols. They can identify enemy positions, weapons, weaknesses in their security arrangements. More importantly, they can assess which guards are nervous, which leaders are overconfident, and where the command structure has vulnerabilities. Instructor Vexhi spoke for the first time since he'd begun. And how exactly do you rescue them without alerting the enemy? You don't rescue them, Marcus replied, and the murmur grew louder. They rescue themselves. Once they've weakened the enemy position and gathered complete intelligence, the hostages coordinate a simultaneous uprising. 50 intelligent, motivated people who know the station better than their captors, all acting at once. The Korthak warrior 2 seats away made a sound that might have been disbelief. Civilians cannot defeat trained military personnel. Marcus turned to address him directly. Cadet Thrackmore, you're absolutely right, in a fair fight. But this isn't a fair fight. It's 50 people who know every maintenance tunnel, emergency protocol, and system override on that station, against maybe 100 soldiers who are in an unfamiliar environment, dealing with constantly degrading conditions, and have been told their job is to guard passive victims. He manipulated the display to show movement patterns through the station. The researchers don't fight the guards directly. They trigger emergency lockdowns that trap small groups of enemies in isolated sections. They vent atmosphere from specific corridors, forcing the guards to retreat. They overload power systems to create explosions that seem like accidents, but eliminate key enemy positions. Marcus paused, looking around the room. Most importantly, they do all of this simultaneously, in a coordinated action that appears to the enemy command like a massive system failure rather than an organized resistance. By the time the guards realize they're under attack, they're already scattered, confused, and cut off from each other. The hall was completely silent now. Even the nebuloid had stopped its gentle humming. Method 2, Marcus continued, exploits the enemy's adherence to standard military protocol. He changed the display to show communication patterns around the space station. The Raider Coalition follows predictable command structures and operational procedures. They've studied galactic military doctrine just like we have, so they know what to expect from any rescue attempt. Marcus highlighted the nebula surrounding the station. The nebula prevents real-time communication, but it allows for information packets sent on specific frequencies. We use this to feed the enemy false intelligence about our capabilities and intentions. What kind of false intelligence? Instructor Vexhai asked. We make them think we're planning a massive direct assault, Marcus replied. We broadcast encrypted communications on frequencies we know they can break, discussing fleet movements, weapon deployments, and attack timelines. We plant evidence of a huge military buildup just outside the nebula. He traced movement patterns on the display. The enemy commander has two choices: stay on the station and fight a superior force, or evacuate with the hostages and research data to a more defensible position. Military protocol says evacuation is the smart choice when facing overwhelming odds. The Altarian in the front row spoke up, her voice carrying the mathematical precision of her species. But surely they would verify the intelligence before making such a significant tactical decision. They'll try, Marcus agreed. But verification takes time, and we'll be feeding them just enough real information mixed with the false to make it credible. Meanwhile, we're actually preparing a small, fast insertion team, the kind they won't expect because all the false intelligence points to a large-scale operation. Marcus highlighted the station's docking bays. When they begin evacuation procedures, that's when they're most vulnerable. They have to move the hostages, transport the research data, and coordinate multiple ships in a complex operation. Their attention is divided, their forces are spread out, and they're focused on logistics instead of security. The insertion team strikes during the evacuation, he continued. Not to stop it, to redirect it. We take control of their evacuation ships and simply fly them to Alliance space instead of their intended destination. The enemy finds themselves delivering the hostages and research directly to us. Another murmur ran through the hall, this one mixed with what sounded like grudging admiration. The approach was so unconventional that several cadets were clearly struggling to find flaws in the logic. Method 3, Marcus said, and he could see Instructor Vexhai lean forward again, involves turning the space station into a weapon. This time, the silence was different. There was an edge of tension in the air as his classmates realized he was approaching territory that most galactic military thinkers avoided. The research station is equipped with standard scientific equipment, Marcus explained, including particle accelerators, fusion reactors, gravity generators, and atmospheric processors. In the right hands, any research facility is essentially a collection of potential weapons. He manipulated the display to show the station's internal systems. We don't try to penetrate the shields or infiltrate the station. Instead, we take control of the scientific equipment remotely through backdoor access protocols that the enemy won't know exist. The Zephyrian beside him was now openly staring. How could we possibly access secured research equipment remotely? Because it's not secured from the manufacturers, Marcus replied. Human corporations learned long ago to build maintenance access into complex systems. The equipment on that station was probably built by dozens of different companies, each with their own service protocols and diagnostic systems. Marcus highlighted specific areas of the station. The particle accelerator can be overloaded to create a localized electromagnetic pulse that will disable all enemy equipment while leaving the station structure intact. The gravity generators can be reversed in specific sections to pin enemy forces against bulkheads while the hostages are safely secured elsewhere. He traced power flows through the station's systems. The atmospheric processors can introduce sedatives into the air supply for specific sections, compounds that are harmless but will render the enemy unconscious within minutes. The fusion reactor can be used to generate a massive sensor bloom that blinds their detection systems and makes extraction possible. But he continued. The most effective approach is to use the research equipment for its intended purpose. Instructor Vexhi's expression was unreadable. Explain. The station is conducting classified research, Marcus said. Chances are good that research involves some form of advanced technology, new weapons, defensive systems, or scientific equipment that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Instead of trying to secure or destroy that technology, we complete it. The hall erupted in surprised voices. Several cadets stood up, looking alarmed. Complete it? The Altarian demanded. Think about it, Marcus said, raising his voice to be heard over the commotion. The enemy wants the research. They're risking everything to capture it. But what if we could finish the research and deploy it immediately? What if those 50 researcher hostages could complete their work and create something that makes the enemy's entire operation pointless? He paused, letting the idea sink in. We make contact with the researchers through hidden channels, just like in Method 1. But instead of asking them to sabotage systems, we ask them to accelerate their work. 50 brilliant scientists, working together with unlimited motivation and complete knowledge of their field. Marcus displayed a timeline on his projection. Most research projects are limited by safety protocols, ethical reviews, and resource constraints. None of those apply when you're trying to save your own life and protect classified technology from enemy hands. The researchers could accomplish in hours what would normally take months. And then? Vexhi asked quietly. Then, we deploy whatever they've created, Marcus said simply. New shield technology that makes the station invulnerable. Weapons that can disable enemy ships without destroying them. Scientific breakthroughs that make the entire conflict obsolete. The beauty of this approach is that it's completely unpredictable. We don't know what they'll create because neither do they until they finish the work. The hall was quiet again, but it was a different kind of silence. Marcus could see his classmates processing ideas that challenged everything they'd learned about military strategy. Cadet Chun, Instructor Vexhi said slowly, those are 3 interesting approaches. You mentioned you had 30 methods total. Yes, Instructor. Very well. Give me 3 more. Marcus glanced at his datapad. Around him, he could feel the attention of every cadet in the room. They were no longer looking at him with skepticism. There was something else in their expressions. Curiosity? Concern? He wasn't sure. Method 4 involves using the nebula as a delivery system for biological agents specifically designed to affect Raider Coalition physiology. Method 5 exploits their prisoner exchange protocols by creating fake high-value prisoners that they'll want to trade for the hostages. Method 6 turns the hostage crisis into a media event that destroys the Raiders' political support base. He spoke quickly, summarizing each approach in a few sentences. Method 7 uses quantum entanglement principles to communicate instantly with the hostages despite the nebula interference. Method 8 involves hiring civilian mercenaries to pose as researchers and infiltrate the station. Method 9 creates a false flag operation that makes the Raiders think they're under attack by their own allies. Vexhi held up a hand. Stop. Marcus fell silent, suddenly, worried that he'd overstepped some boundary. Cadet Chun, she said, her voice carrying an odd note. Are all 30 of your methods this unconventional? I'm not sure what you mean by unconventional, Instructor. They're all based on established human military principles and historical precedent. Human military principles, Vexhi repeated slowly. Show me methods 10 through 15. Marcus consulted his notes. Method 10 involves creating an artificial intelligence virus that corrupts the enemy's computer systems. Method 11 uses civilian shipping to secretly transport military assets. Method 12 exploits religious or cultural beliefs specific to the enemy's background. Method 13 creates false surrender scenarios that allow infiltration. Method 14 uses economic warfare to cut off the enemy's supply lines. Method 15 involves recruiting the enemy's own personnel as double agents through blackmail or bribery. The hall was completely silent now. Marcus could see that several of his classmates looked uncomfortable, while others appeared fascinated. Cadet Chun, Instructor Vexhi said, and there was something in her voice that Marcus couldn't identify. Continue with the remaining methods. All of them. Marcus looked around the room, suddenly, realizing that something had fundamentally changed in the dynamic of the test. This was no longer about finding 3 solutions. It had become something else entirely. Method 16, he began, and he could see some of his classmates leaning forward to listen more carefully. Involves psychological manipulation of the enemy command structure through targeted misinformation campaigns. As he continued through his list, Marcus began to understand why his classmates were looking increasingly uncomfortable. Each method he described represented a way of thinking that was foreign to standard galactic military doctrine. Where his alien colleagues thought in terms of technological superiority and direct confrontation, Marcus was describing approaches that were indirect, deceptive, and often morally ambiguous. But, as he spoke, he also noticed something else. Instructor Vexhai was taking detailed notes, and her expression was becoming more intense with each method he described. When he finally finished with Method 30, using the enemy's own success against them by allowing them to capture false research while the real work was hidden elsewhere, the hall remained silent for a full minute. Cadet Chun, Vexhai finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, "Where did you learn these approaches?" "From human military history, Instructor. And from thinking about how humans have always fought when they were outnumbered, outgunned, and had no choice but to win." Vexhai stood slowly, her 4 red eyes never leaving his face. "Class dismissed," she announced suddenly. "All cadets except Cadet Chin will report to Study Hall 7 for independent review of today's exercise. Cadet Chin, remain here." As the hall emptied, Marcus found himself alone with an instructor who looked like she had just seen something that fundamentally challenged her understanding of the universe. The silence in the empty lecture hall was deafening. Marcus stood alone facing Instructor Vexhai, whose 4 red eyes seemed to bore into his soul. Her silver skin had taken on a slightly darker hue. Something Marcus had learned indicated deep contemplation or stress in Altarians. "Sit down, Cadet Chun," she said quietly. Marcus remained standing. "Have I done something wrong, Instructor?" "That," Vexhai said slowly, "is exactly what I need to determine." "Sit." This time it wasn't a request. Marcus took a seat in the front row, suddenly aware of how small he felt in the vast empty hall. The twin suns of Kepler, 442b, were setting outside the crystal walls, casting strange shadows across the floor. Vexhai activated a privacy screen around them, a shimmering field that would prevent any recording or eavesdropping. Marcus had never seen this particular security measure used in a classroom setting. "Cadet Chun," she began, settling into a chair across from him. "In my 47 years as a military instructor, I have trained officers from 138 different species. I have seen tactical brilliance, strategic innovation, and creative problem-solving that spans the breadth of galactic civilization." She paused, her red eyes never leaving his face. "I have never, in all that time, heard anything like what you just presented." Marcus felt his heart racing. "I followed the assignment parameters, Instructor. You asked for methods to resolve the situation, and you provided 30 different ways to think about warfare that contradict almost everything we teach at this academy," Vexhai interrupted. "More concerning, several of your methods involve approaches that most civilized species would consider problematic." The word hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Marcus felt a cold fear creeping up his spine. "Problematic how, Instructor?" Vexhai activated her data pad, scrolling through notes she'd taken during his presentation. Method 12 involves exploiting religious beliefs for military advantage. Method 14 uses economic warfare to harm civilian populations. Method 15 advocates recruiting enemy personnel through blackmail and bribery. Method 23 suggested using civilian ships as unmarked military assets, which violates 16 different interstellar treaties. She looked up at him. "Cadet Chin, are you familiar with the Altair Conventions?" Every military officer in the galaxy knew the Altair Conventions, the foundational treaties that governed warfare between civilized species. "Yes, Instructor." "Then, you know that many of your proposed methods would be considered war crimes under galactic law." The bottom dropped out of Marcus's stomach. He had been so focused on creative problem-solving that he hadn't considered the legal implications. In human military history, many of the tactics he'd described were controversial but ultimately accepted as necessary for survival. Apparently, galactic civilization had different standards. I wasn't trying to suggest illegal approaches, he said quickly. I was thinking about the problem from a human perspective, and in human military history. Yes, Vexhai interrupted, human military history. Tell me, Cadet Chun, how many wars has humanity fought? Marcus blinked, confused by the seemingly random question. I'm sorry, Instructor. How many wars has your species fought throughout its history? Approximate number. Marcus thought about it. Human history was filled with conflict at every scale, from tribal skirmishes to global wars. Thousands, Instructor. Maybe tens of thousands, depending on how you define war. Vexhai's expression didn't change, but her skin darkened another shade. The Altarian Republic has fought 12 wars in our recorded history, spanning 40,000 years. The Zephyrian Empire has fought 7 wars in 22,000 years. The Korthak Federation has the most aggressive military tradition among galactic civilizations, and they have fought 31 wars in 18,000 years. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. Humanity had fought more wars in its brief history than most species had fought in tens of thousands of years. Your species, Vexhai continued, has been part of galactic civilization for 50 years. In that time, you have been involved in 3 interstellar conflicts, all as junior partners to more established military powers. Yet somehow, you have just described tactical approaches that demonstrate an understanding of warfare that no other species has ever displayed. She stood up, beginning to pace in front of him. Most species develop military capabilities as a response to external threats or territorial disputes. Conflict is generally limited, formal, and conducted according to established rules that minimize casualties and collateral damage. War, for most of us, is an unfortunate necessity that we try to conduct as humanely as possible. Marcus remained silent, sensing that anything he said would only make the situation worse. But humans, Vexhai continued, appear to have developed military thinking as a form of art. You don't just fight wars, you study them, analyze them, and develop increasingly sophisticated methods of defeating enemies through any means necessary. She stopped pacing and fixed him with her stare again. Cadet Shin, do you understand why this concerns me? Because you think humans are too aggressive for galactic civilization? Marcus asked quietly. Because I think humans are too good at warfare for galactic civilization, Vexhai corrected. Every method you described today demonstrates a level of tactical thinking that suggests your species doesn't just participate in conflicts. You've perfected the art of winning them by any means necessary. She activated her data pad again, scrolling through his presentation. Method 7 involves instant communication technology that could revolutionize military coordination. Method 11 describes supply chain manipulation that could cripple an enemy's ability to sustain operations. Method 19 outlines psychological warfare techniques that could break an enemy's will to fight without firing a shot. Marcus felt a growing sense of unease. Those are just applications of existing human knowledge, Instructor. Exactly, Vexhai said. That's what terrifies me. You're not describing experimental tactics or theoretical approaches. You're describing proven methodologies that your species has actually used in real conflicts. She sat down again, her expression grave. Cadet Chun, I need you to understand something about the Galactic Alliance. We have maintained peace for over 800 years through careful balance, mutual respect, and adherence to civilized standards of conduct. Wars are rare, limited, and conducted according to established protocols that all species understand and accept. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. But what you've described today suggests that humanity approaches warfare from a fundamentally different perspective. You don't see conflict as an unfortunate necessity. You see it as a problem to be solved through maximum application of intelligence, creativity, and ruthless efficiency. The truth of her words hit Marcus hard. She was right. Everything he'd learned about human military history did suggest exactly what she was describing. Humans had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of defeating enemies through any available means. The question, Vexhai continued, is whether humanity can be trusted with advanced galactic military technology and command authority, knowing what we now know about how your species thinks about warfare. The implication was clear. His performance today hadn't just challenged academic expectations. It had raised fundamental questions about humanity's role in galactic civilization. Instructor, Marcus said carefully, what happens now? Now, Vexhai replied, we conduct a more thorough evaluation. I need to understand whether your presentation today represents typical human military thinking or whether you're an exceptional individual whose capabilities aren't representative of your species as a whole. She activated a communication device. Admiral Kestar, this is Instructor Vexhai. I need to speak with you immediately about a matter of galactic security. Marcus felt his blood turn cold. Admiral Kestar was the commandant of the Academy, a legendary military leader whose decisions could affect the fate of entire worlds. While we wait for the Admiral, Vexhai said, I want you to answer some questions honestly. The future of human participation in galactic military affairs may depend on your responses. Marcus straightened in his chair. I understand, Instructor. Question 1. Are the tactical approaches you described today commonly known among human military personnel? Marcus considered the question carefully. Some are more specialized than others, but, yes, most human military officers would be familiar with the basic concepts. They're taught in our military academies and discussed in our strategic literature. Vexhai made a note. Question 2. How many different ways could a typical human military unit resolve the hostage scenario I presented? I'm not sure I understand the question, Instructor. If I presented the same scenario to a group of human military officers, how many different solutions would they propose? Marcus thought about it. Human military culture encouraged creative thinking and unconventional approaches. Probably dozens, depending on their experience and specializations. Maybe hundreds if you included special operations personnel and intelligence specialists. Another note. Question 3. In human military training, are soldiers taught to consider approaches that other species might find morally questionable? This was a trap, and Marcus knew it. But he had committed to honesty. Human military ethics focus on achieving objectives while minimizing unnecessary suffering. But, yes, we're taught that in extreme situations, almost any approach might be necessary to protect civilian populations or prevent greater disasters, including approaches that violate established interstellar law. Marcus hesitated. Human military doctrine predates our contact with galactic civilization. Some traditional approaches might conflict with galactic law, but human forces operating under Alliance authority are bound by Alliance regulations. But human officers retain knowledge of those traditional approaches? Yes, Instructor. Vexhai set down her data pad and looked at him with an expression that might have been pity. Cadet Chen, do you realize what you've done today? I've answered a tactical exercise to the best of my ability. You've demonstrated that humanity possesses military knowledge that could destabilize the balance of power in galactic civilization. You've shown that human military thinking operates according to principles that most species would find alien and disturbing. And you've raised questions about whether humans can be trusted with the kind of authority that graduation from this academy represents. Before Marcus could respond, a new voice filled the air. Indeed he has. Admiral Kestar materialized in the center of the room, her image projected through the Academy's advanced communication system. The ethereal commander appeared as a shifting pattern of energy and light, beautiful and terrible at the same time. Admiral, Vexhai said, standing quickly. I have been monitoring this conversation, Kestar announced, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. And I have been reviewing the human's tactical presentation. This situation requires immediate attention. Marcus stood as well, feeling completely out of his depth. He was a cadet facing two of the most powerful military leaders in galactic civilization, and apparently his attempt to excel in an academic exercise had created an interstellar incident. Cadet Chun, Admiral Kestar addressed him directly. You will report to Isolation Suite 7 immediately. You are confined there pending a full security review. Admiral, Marcus said, I was only trying to complete the assignment. You were demonstrating capabilities that threaten the fundamental assumptions upon which galactic military doctrine is based, Kestar interrupted. Whether intentionally or not, you have revealed information that changes how we must view humanity's role in galactic defense. The Admiral's projection shifted, becoming more intense. The question now is whether humanity represents an ally whose capabilities we have underestimated, or a potential threat whose military knowledge must be contained. Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. His attempt to prove human worth had instead created suspicion about human intentions. "Report to your confinement immediately," Admiral Kestar ordered. "You will be questioned by Alliance intelligence, and your responses will determine not just your own future, but potentially the future of human participation in galactic military affairs." As the Admiral's projection faded and Instructor Vexhai escorted him from the hall, Marcus realized that his tactical exercise had accomplished something no human had managed in 50 years of galactic contact. He had forced the galactic powers to take humanity seriously as a military force. The question was whether they would decide humanity was an asset to be cultivated or a threat to be contained. Walking through the academy corridors toward his confinement, Marcus reflected on the irony of his situation. He had wanted to prove that humans belonged in galactic civilization. Instead, he might have proven that they were too different to ever truly fit in. But, as he thought about it further, another possibility occurred to him. Maybe the test hadn't been about finding 3 ways to solve a tactical problem. Maybe it had been about something else entirely. Maybe it had been about revealing who humanity really was. And maybe, just maybe, that revelation would change everything.